Everything changes, everything evolves. And if you don't change and evolve, then you get left behind, you get left in the dust. And I've never wanted to be left in the dust. I wanted to be a part of whatever was going on, and going from writing songs by myself to co-writing and things. These are things I felt like I had to do in order to stay current and to stay involved.
Grand Ole Opry icon Bill Anderson has a career that spans an impressive 7 decades. As one of the most awarded songwriters in the history of country music, his career includes being a million-selling recording artist many times over, a beloved onstage performer, a television game show host, a network soap opera star, and the author of 4 books. His backup group, the Po Folks Band, has been considered one of the finest instrumental and vocal groups in the business. Let's learn why his moniker, Whisperin Bill, loudly resonates in all he does as a performer and a storyteller.
We're glad you joined us to hear these inspiring stories from older adults, people who have so much experience and words of wisdom to share, but are sometimes overlooked in society today. I'm Sally Hussey, the CEO of 50 Forward, a Nashville-based nonprofit. Our mission is to support, champion, and enhance the lives of those 50 and older.
And I'm Susan Sizemore, your guide through these beautiful conversations with those who are living life to the fullest and who know how to squeeze the day in their second chapter of life. Now, in my second chapter and encore career, I'm following my passion for sharing the stories of older adults with you and with the world. If you like what you hear, please rate and follow Squeeze the Day on your favorite podcast platform. Today's Squeeze the Day is brought to you by the All of Us Research Program from the National Institutes of Health. Learn how you can help change the future of health by participating in the program. Visit www.joinallofus.org to learn more. Welcome to Squeeze the Day.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
It's so nice to see you. I want to talk a little bit about your past. First of all, your name is synonymous with songwriting and performing. But before we get into music, which is where most of our conversation, I think, is going to be centered, I want to talk about a couple things I discovered about you. Tell us about turning down the opportunity to play for the Chicago Cubs.
Well, you're greatly exaggerating what really happened. I was a left-handed pitcher in high school. I loved baseball. It was always a passion of mine, very much like country music turned out to be. I had the chance when I graduated from high school. There were some what we used to call bird dog scouts that used to come to the little high schools down in the area in Georgia where I grew up. And they would watch us play. And I had one of the bird dog scouts come up to me after my senior year. And he said, you know, if you're interested in pursuing baseball, if you'd really like to maybe consider playing professional baseball, I can get you a tryout with the Chicago Cubs. You'd have to go to Mesa, Arizona this fall. And he said, I think you've got all the potential. He said, we just need to work on some things with you, the coaches and all. He said, I think you could do it. And had I gone to Arizona and to the tryout camp with the Cubs, that would have been instead of going to college. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to the University of Georgia. I'll play baseball over there. And the scouts said, well, sure, that's fine. Said, maybe you can get some good coaching over there, and then maybe you can sign with the Cubs after you get out of college. So that's what I went to college to do, was to play baseball. But I got there and I met a couple of guys older than me who were going to school on the GI Bill, and they wanted to get up a little hillbilly band. All of a sudden I said, I don't know if I want to play baseball or not. I might want to play my guitar. They had a little 30-minute spot on the radio station on Saturday afternoons, and next thing you knew, I'd forgotten baseball and I was trying to pick a guitar and sing country music.
Wow, so interesting. But left-handed pitchers, they're a commodity. So you also have a background as a journalist and as a DJ. Do you want to touch a little bit on that before we get into your music career?
I have always loved 3 things in my life, going back to as far as I can remember. The 3 things that I have just been passionate about in my life were writing anything. I was the nerd in English class in school. The teacher would say, write a 2-page essay And I'd say, can I make it 3? Can I make it 4? I've loved to write. I have loved sports, particularly baseball, but I like all sports and country music. Those have been my 3 things in my life. And I knew from an early age somewhere that I was going to combine some of that and end up doing that for my life's work. And I could have been a sports writer and been very happy doing it. I worked a long time while I was still in school, and then some after I got out, for the sports department at the Atlanta Constitution newspaper. I was a sports editor of a little weekly newspaper out in one of the suburbs of Atlanta. And I just happened to take my love for music and put that with the writing rather than my love for sports. And I became a songwriter instead of a sports writer.
Well, and we're glad you did. I want to talk a little bit more about your roots and about your family. I know that, you talked a little bit about Georgia, but tell us a bit about your roots.
I was born in Columbia, South Carolina, but my parents were both from Georgia. And when I was 8 years old, my parents felt like their parents were getting on up in years. And so they wanted to go back to Georgia. So right after my 8th birthday, we moved from Columbia, South Carolina to a little town called Griffin, Georgia. And from Griffin, Georgia, we moved to Decatur, Georgia, which is a suburb of Atlanta. Neither of my parents were involved in show business or music business. Mama was just a homemaker. I had one sister, and there were the 2 of us. And my dad was in the insurance business. So the fact that I grew up wanting to play a guitar and write hillbilly songs was kind of foreign in my family.
But did they embrace that?
They had to. They didn't have a choice. No, I will say this in all due credit to my parents. They were wonderful. The only thing they ever asked me to do was to go to college and get that college degree, which I did. I remember my dad saying to me many times, he said, son, if you're going to be a garbage collector, just be the best garbage collector you can be. And if you're going to go into music, just give it all that you've got and be the best you can be at it. So he didn't try to change my mind or anything. I'm sure he probably wondered a few times when I was going to come home and get a real job, but I never did.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the songs where you've had hits. Ray Price in 1957 recorded the song City Lights, and then more recently, Whiskey Lullaby. What an amazing song with Brad Paisley and Alison Krauss. And your hits just keep on coming, and they seem so appropriate for the time that they're being released. How is that possible, given the fact that you're a veteran of the industry, but you seem to be timeless?
Well, that's a great compliment. I appreciate you saying that. The biggest change between 1957 and 2005, when Whiskey Lullaby was voted the Song of the Year in country music, the biggest change for Bill Anderson was that I went from writing songs by myself to this thing called co-writing, which is the big thing in the music business in Nashville today. I found other writers. I wrote Whiskey Lullaby with a great writer and a very talented singer and musician named John Randall. And by getting into co-writing, I was able to expand my horizons a little bit. I didn't do that until I had been writing songs for 30-something years by myself. I didn't think I could co-write. I didn't think I could make an appointment with somebody and sit down and say, okay, we're going to write songs starting at 10 o'clock. We're going to write until 2, and we're going to break for lunch and come back and write until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I didn't think you could write songs that way. I thought you had to pull down the shades and turn off the lights and see how miserable you could get at 2 o'clock in the morning to write sad country songs. But I found out that I can do it the other way. And that's the biggest change. That's how I think I have managed to somehow stay relevant. I think that's the biggest key to it anyway.
I read a story, and I would love for you to briefly recount it if you're comfortable doing that, about someone suggesting that you meet Vince Gill and record with him. And when I read the story, I had a laugh out loud moment because it was priceless.
Well, Vince and I went to the same girl to cut our hair, and she liked Vince and she liked me, and she kept telling Vince, you need to meet this guy, Bill Anderson, and you need to write with him. Well, Vince, of course, came to town quite a few years after I did, and we hadn't had the opportunity to really get acquainted. And she kept telling me, you need to write with Vince Gill because he's such a nice guy and you guys have a lot in common and blah, blah. And long story short is one day I finally decided to call him. And when I called him to see if he'd like to try to write a song, I got his voicemail, and he answered his voicemail, and he said, "Hi, this is Whisperin Bill." And I thought, well, not only does he know who I am, he's stealing my act. But we got together, became close friends. We're good friends to this very day. First time we wrote together, we wrote a #1 song that he recorded called "Which Bridge to Cross and Which Bridge to Burn." And that was really kind of the jumping off place for me as far as co-writing. That's when I said, hey, maybe I can do this co-writing thing, and maybe it is something I ought to try. And I give him a whole lot of credit.
Oh, how nice. How did the name Whisperin Bill come about?
I don't know. I had a little comedian on my syndicated television show. I did a syndicated TV show from 1965 to 1974 for 9 years. And I had a little comedian on there with me for part of that time named Don Bowman. And Don is the one that hung the whispering thing on me, and he would go around calling me Whisperin Bill or Old Whisper or something. And pretty soon everybody picked it up and became a nickname. It kind of hurt my feelings at first. I thought, well, they're making fun of me. But I have just blessed or cursed with a soft voice, I guess. And later on, I realized it was a real asset. There's a Bill Anderson or a William Anderson or a Billy Anderson in every phone book in the United States. It's not an unusual name, but Whisperin Bill is an unusual name. And I was able to get a little handle without having to change my name to Conway Twitty. So I'm glad it happened.
So you talked a bit about TV, and you were on an ABC daytime soap opera, the One Life to Live series, playing yourself for a while. How did that come about?
Well, I had been doing some things at ABC and different things in California, in Hollywood. I had done a game show on ABC prior to that I co-hosted with a girl named Sarah Purcell, a show called The Better Sex that was on in 1977 and 1978. And they canceled The Better Sex, not because it wasn't doing well, because it was doing well, but they wanted to devote more time on the network. In those days, the soap operas were really at a peak. They were very, very popular. General Hospital was the leading one, and One Life to Live was the second one. And when ABC canceled our game show, they came to me and said, we're not running you off at all. We want you to stay as part of the network. We're going to write you into the soap opera One Life to Live. And I thought, oh, sure you are. Yeah. Of course you are. Well, doggone if they didn't do it. And like you said, I played the part of myself. It was a real stretch, but it was back in the days of the urban cowboy. Country music was very popular in New York City and Chicago and Los Angeles. And so they just kind of wove it into the script of the show. And I was off and on the show for a little over 3 years.
Wow, that's a long stint. So then, and you were performing as yourself, as country music artist Bill Anderson.
Yeah, and you know what the good thing about that, Susan, was the fact that they didn't make me stick to the script. They said, now, here's what we want you to say, but you say it in the words that you would normally say it to. If somebody comes to you, if a young singer comes to you and says, give me some advice, we don't want to script that. We want you to give the advice just like you would really give it to somebody. So they gave me a certain amount of freedom, which made it a lot more fun than if I had to memorize lines and things. And it was a very enjoyable thing in my life, part of my life. I was not necessarily a fan of soap operas. I had never watched them or anything much, but neither was I a big fan of game shows. And I got to be on all the big game shows, Match Game and Password and Hollywood Squares and all those different shows, Tattletales and shows like that. And I fell in love with it and felt a fondness for the people. Got to make a lot of wonderful friends in both of those, in the game show business and in the soap opera world.
You also hosted a couple series on TNN, did you not?
I did. When the network first came on, I was the only person in Nashville that had ever had any experience hosting a game show. So I think it kind of fell in my lap. I hosted a show called Fandango, a country music trivia show on the Nashville network for a little over 6 years. And then I was the co-producer of a talent show called You Can Be a Star that Jim Ed Brown hosted on camera, but I was one of the behind the scenes people there. And then I did a lot of TV work on the network. When Ralph Emery was doing Nashville Now, he'd take a vacation and a few days off, and a lot of times they would ask me to fill in for him. So I look better on the radio, but I've had quite a television career.
Well, and You Can Be a Star was kind of the icebreaker maybe for today's Voice and some of the other talent contests that are now so popular, don't you think?
Yeah, they stole American Idol from us. Not really, but we were ahead of our time with that because the American Idols and the Voice and these things came along after You Can Be a Star. And the funny thing about You Can Be a Star was none of the winners on You Can Be a Star ever went on to have a lot of success. But a lot of the people that were losers on You Can Be a Star went on to have real big careers. Patricia Yearwood, Alan Jackson, there were several different people that were on the periphery of You Can Be a Star that were successful, but none of the people who were actually the winners went on to do very much.
That's very interesting. Well, it wasn't fan voted. We could say that because technology wasn't there back then.
Well, you're right.
So let's talk about music a little outside of country. Pop artists have recorded your material as well, including James Brown, Aretha Franklin, and Dean Martin. What was it like to cross those musical boundaries and gain visibility for your talents outside of the country music industry?
Well, you're right. Those people did record songs of mine, and I'm very, very proud of them. But going back to the very beginning, the first song that I wrote, we talked about earlier, was a song called City Lights for Ray Price. Not the first one I wrote, but the first one I wrote anybody ever heard. And even in those days, when that song was out, it was a big country hit. So going back early in my career, I was having some crossover success. And then later on, of course, with the Dean Martins and the Aretha Franklins and James Browns and Bing Crosbys and people that reached into my catalog and recorded my song. It's a great compliment when somebody takes one of your songs and records it, and especially when they record it in their own style and put their own stamp on it, and not necessarily try to trace the picture that you painted, but they paint their own picture. It's a great compliment.
If this conversation is motivating you to squeeze the day, learn more about getting involved in your home community, to deliver food, to volunteer, or to just get active. If you'd like to learn more, visit 54.org. That's FIFTYFORWARD.org. There's so much to gain by helping others. Now, let's get back to our show. So last summer, you were recognized as the longest-serving member of the Grand Ole Opry, marking 62 years. Tell us how that feels.
Old. It feels old. I've been going to the Grand Ole Opry as a member of the family since, as you said, 1961. July 15th, 1961, actually. And when I had my 62nd anniversary back in July of 2023, I became the longest serving member in the history of the Opry. The Opry's been going almost 100 years now, and I've been a member longer than anybody else. And it's quite a compliment. It's quite a milestone. It's a testament to a whole lot of other people besides me, because I've had at least a half a dozen different general managers at the Opry, any of them who could have fired me anytime they wanted to. And I've had, great musicians and people show up and perform with me and support me. So it's not just something I've done by myself. I've had an awful lot of help.
Well, and the Opry has continued to evolve in different ways based on what they see as needs of maybe an expanding demographic, but it's probably been a very interesting ride for you.
Well, it has, because when I came to the Opry, the people like the old-time string bands, like names like the Fruit Jar Drinkers and the Gully Jumpers and Sam and Kirk McGee and the boys from Sunny, Tennessee. That was kind of the roots of the Opry. And then, of course, the Roy Acuffs and Ernest Tubbs and these people came along, Bill Monroe's and people. And now it's expanded beyond that, demographically, racially, culturally. I think the Opry has had to change to survive 100 years. I don't think the show that they put on the air in 1925 when it started would have lasted for 100 years. It's been able to evolve, and I guess our audience has evolved with it. And where it goes in the next 100 years, who knows?
Very true. Speaking of evolving, you've evolved greatly in your lifetime and you try different things really to expand your roots. Looking back, why would you say that was so important to you?
Well, because nothing stays the same. You know, the first automobile that I ever drove was my grandfather's 1937 Oldsmobile. It had a stick shift in the floor, had running boards on the side, and big old white wall tires and things. And I mean, that got me from point A to point B. And a car today still gets you from point A to point B, but forget the running boards, and you don't have to press the clutch and shift gears and things like you used to do. So everything changes, everything evolves. And if you don't change and evolve, then you get left behind. You get left in the dust. And I've never wanted to be left in the dust. I wanted to be a part of whatever was going on. And so I've tried to, as I said earlier, talking about going from writing songs by myself to co-writing and things. These are things I felt like I had to do in order to stay current and to stay involved.
So one thing, too, that I know about your career is you've played a huge role in helping others develop. And one of those artists, for example, is Connie Smith. Let's talk a bit about your role in her career.
I was performing at a little outdoor country music park called Frontier Ranch, which was about 20, 30, maybe 40 miles outside of Columbus, Ohio, in the summer of 1963. And this was a Sunday thing where people came, brought picnic lunches, brought their families, and listened to country music all afternoon and into the night. And the week that I was there as the special guest star in August of 63, I had just come off of a big hit record. There was a pop and country hit called Still. And they called me a couple of weeks before I went to Frontier Ranch and said, between the afternoon show and the night show, the week that you're here, we're having the finals of a talent contest. And we wonder if you would be one of the judges in the talent contest. And I said, well, sure, I'll be glad to. So I did my part on stage and signed a few autographs and went out and sat in the audience and watched the talent contest. And this little girl came out on the stage. And I say little girl because she's very, very tiny, in her early 20s back then. And she had a guitar bigger than she was and a voice bigger than both of them. And her name was Connie Smith. And she came out and opened her mouth. She sang so great. She won the contest hands down. And I told her after the contest, I said, if you ever want to come to Nashville, let me know and I'll try to help you because I think you could have a great career. But about 6 months later, she called me and she said, I may want to come to Nashville after all. And she did, and I helped her get a recording contract and wrote some songs for her. I'm very proud to say her career turned out pretty well. She's now a member of the Country Music Hall of Fame.
Yeah, she has had a terrific career, and her voice still is just phenomenal. I really like hearing her sing. You recently said at the Hall of Fame medallion ceremony that the accolade and presentation gave you goosebumps. Will you expand on why that was such an important moment for you?
Well, it's an important moment for anybody who gets inducted into the Hall of Fame because, I mean, the Country Music Hall of Fame membership in the Hall of Fame is, that's the top rung on the ladder. That's Yankee Stadium to a baseball player or Hollywood to a movie actor or TV performer or something. There's just no higher rung on the ladder than the Country Music Hall of Fame. And when they elected me to the Hall of Fame in 2001, it was the culmination of all the dreams and all the aspirations, all the hopes, all the plans, all the hard work. It's just somebody saying, well, you done good. and we want future generations to know who you were and to know what you did.
That's so powerful. And talk a little bit about the 5 Country Music Hall of Famers that just recorded a song with you. And not only is the friendship very powerful, but also the song is. Can you tell us a bit about that and how the song came to be?
Thank you. The song was written by myself and Bobby Tomberlin and Lance Miller, 2 really good songwriters here in town. And we wrote it actually 2 or 3 years ago. It's called The Country I Grew Up With. And when we went to put it out, the record company said, wow, what if you could get a bunch of your friends in the business to come on the record with you. So we weren't able to get any big names, but we settled for Willie Nelson, Vince Gill, Bobby Bear, Jimmy Fortune, who was part of the Statler Brothers, and they're Hall of Fame members, of course, and myself. So that made a total of 5 Hall of Fame members on this one song.
Wow.
It's just talking about how things have changed and how much we still value the values and the things that we were taught as children and the things that we grew up with. And I was so thrilled that Willie and Vince and Jimmy and Bobby all wanted to be a part of the record, that they shared in my excitement over the song, and then the people at Universal Music, UMG Records, that were nice enough to put it out.
Yeah, powerful group of people, powerful performance, and a powerful message. I really encourage people to check that out. I've got a quick speed round of questions for you. What do you do to stay young and engaged?
I surround myself with young people, and I say that and I laugh, but I'm semi-serious. My manager is about half my age. I've got a son older than my manager, and in order for me to get plugged into the max for myself, I need somebody who can talk the language of the people his age, because they're the people that are running the business today.
What's your favorite hobby?
This is going to sound really corny, and I'll go a little bit beyond this, but my work has always been my hobby, really. Getting a guitar and sitting down and writing a song, just the various things that I enjoy doing about this business, talking to people like you. This is fun. I guess if I really have hobbies, though, outside of the music business, I love sports, as I've mentioned earlier. I love to follow sports. I'm a big Atlanta Braves baseball fan. I'm a big Tennessee Titans football fan, University of Georgia football fan, and fan of all the sports there. I enjoy that. I read a lot. If you were to look at my bookshelf, you would think I was nuts, because I have such an eclectic collection of books and things that I read. I try to keep up with current events and news magazines and the internet and various things like that. So I have things apart from music that interest me, that I stay interested in. But music, really, it's my vocation and my profession. But fortunately, even after all these years, it's still my hobby, or one of my hobbies.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Go back. Go home. No, I wouldn't at all. I think if I could sit down and talk to my 17, 18-year-old self, I'd say lighten up a little bit. I've always taken things pretty seriously. Although I love to laugh, and I'm not a serious person by nature. But I knew when I started in the music business that there were a lot of people more talented than me. I knew they could sing better than me. I knew there were people that could write songs better than me. And I knew that in order for me to make it, I was just going to have to outwork a bunch of them. I was going to have to work twice as hard as they did. And so I was awfully intense in my early days, and I probably didn't enjoy some things as much as I should have enjoyed them. I think I would say to my younger self, hey, lighten up, man. You're going to do okay. It's okay to work hard, but it's okay to take what you do seriously, but you don't have to take yourself seriously. And I try not to take myself seriously.
So I'm wondering what else is on the horizon for Bill Anderson.
I wonder the same thing. I never have planned what happened in my life. It was just always kind of what's behind door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3. It's just been, somebody says, well, look behind that door. Okay, let's see what's back there. And one day it was a game show. One day it was a soap opera. One day it was a recording contract. It was all these different things, a membership at the Opry, the Hall of Fame. I didn't plan any of these things. They just kind of happened. So I think it would be kind of presumptuous on my part and kind of foolish at this point for me to start planning things. I hope I can have a few more good years on this old earth. I hope the good Lord will grant me that I can keep my wits about me, and that I can continue to contribute some songs and some music. Maybe I can help inspire some of the younger people, and maybe I can still have a laugh or two and a good time somewhere along the way. It's been a wonderful life, and I have been very, very blessed.
I want to talk just a minute about our agency serves older adults in the Middle Tennessee area, and one of our values is focused on being an inclusive community. I'm wondering, as an older adult who's seen a lot in life, what does community mean to you?
If anything, a sense of community says to you that you're not in it by yourself. You're not having to plow those fields and ride those roads alone. There's somebody out there riding them with you, whether it's just a casual acquaintance or somebody that you've become very, very close to. And I think that's one of the things that makes the Grand Ole Opry the special thing that it is there is a sense of community out there. We all feel like we're kind of in the thing together. The Grand Ole Opry is not a star, one person being a star or one celebrity. It's the coming together of the whole community, that when the performance is over, the audience can get up and say, wow, that was a great show. That was a great ensemble. That was a great piece of community right there. And I think that's extremely important in all phases of our lives, not just in our work, but in our leisure and everything. We're not in it by ourselves, and we're not supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. I have two closing questions that I ask all of our guests. What is one piece of advice your parents or an older adult might have shared with you that at the time you thought, this is really silly, but now that rings true in our everyday life?
When I would sing a Hank Williams song, and I came along when Hank Williams Sr. was at the peak of his career, I would try to sound like Hank Williams. If I was singing like Ernest Tubb, I tried to sound like Ernest Tubb or Webb Pierce or whoever. My dad came to me one day and he said, son, why don't you quit trying to sound like all these other people, and why don't you just start trying to sound like Bill Anderson? And I didn't understand what he meant in the beginning. But when I really started trying to write songs, then I had a way to sound like Bill Anderson, because I'd never heard anybody sing these songs before. Hank Williams had never sung them, and Webb Pierce and Ernest Tubb had never sung these songs. So I was able to take that piece of advice, and I'm not the greatest singer in the world, but I've been able to develop a style over the years that I might not have been able to develop if my dad hadn't have said that to me. Son, just be yourself. And I tell people that all the time.
So what is it, Bill, that you do to squeeze the day?
Try to wake up in a good mood every morning. My first thing every morning when I wake up is, number one, I say, thank you, Lord, for another day. I make me a cup of coffee and get me a little bite to eat and sit down and have a little quiet time. I'm not a religious fanatic by any stretch of the imagination, but I have a very deep and abiding faith. I like to read some spiritual things early in the morning that kind of help put me on the right path. And by the time I get up, I have a chair in my family room. I call it my God chair. And I sit there and have quiet time every morning before I get up and try to squeeze the day. And when I get up out of that chair and start squeezing, I try to do it in a very positive frame of mind and with a very positive and grateful attitude.
Thank you so much, Bill, for sharing your inspiring story with us. As I leave you today, I'm sending everyone a big squeeze. Until next time. Squeeze the Day is made possible through listeners like you. If you enjoy this podcast, please help us continue to share inspiring stories of older adults and visit 54ward.org. That's FIFTYFORWARD.org to make a contribution. And now I challenge everyone listening to go squeeze the day.